The increase in the cost of living is increasingly becoming a problem for the British. Every seventh person goes without meals because they don't have the money for them. Often, there's not even enough money to cook. Now, the economic crisis is also threatening to degenerate into a health crisis. The past few months have been really tough, as people say. What many people buy is determined by how much money is left over after paying the electricity and gas bills. And concerns are not mere isolated cases. In 3 months, the number of households in the UK that have reduced or eliminated their meals to save money has skyrocketed by 57%, according to recent data from the Food Foundation. 7.3 million adults are affected by these cost issues. That corresponds to every seventh household in the country. 2.4 million additional to that go often without food for a whole day because they don't have the money to do so. For many children, it's no longer a matter, of course, to eat regularly. 17.2% of households with minors now live in so-called food insecurity, where access to food is restricted for financial reasons. At the beginning of the year, it was 12.1%. Those affected have been under pressure from two sides for months. On the one hand, food prices are rising significantly. On average, they were 6% higher in the country in March than a year earlier. Similar to Germany here, edible oils, eggs and dairy products have become more expensive than average. And on the other hand, especially for less well-off households, which traditionally spend a larger part of their income on electricity and heat, the disposable income has shrunk particularly significantly in view of the massive rise in energy prices. The extremely significant increase in limited access to food makes a catastrophic situation visible for families. There is no question that the problem has become far too significant for dining and food distribution to get the situation under control. A dramatic situation has been emerging for many households for weeks. In mid-March, Richard Walker, head of the Iceland grocery chain, pointed out that his company was increasingly hearing from food banks that it was difficult for them to find buyers for potatoes or root vegetables. People would point out that they had no money to pay for the energy required for cooking. We are seeing an increasing number of people who have never needed food bank support before, said Vic Burrill, chief executive of the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership, which runs an emergency food network in the city. They too have observed that requests for food that doesn't need to be cooked are increasing as energy bills have become so much of a focus. A government spokesman said the government recognizes the pressure the rising cost of living is putting on the country and is doing what it can to help and provide financial support. Do they? High inflation rates and rising energy prices are also making life difficult for many people elsewhere in Europe. To make matters worse for UK households, taxes were also raised in early April to fund the long overdue elder care scheme. So far, the government has announced, among other things, a credit system in order to be able to pay off higher energy prices over a longer period of time. And Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak has so far turned down calls to increase welfare payments to offset inflation. In April, support was raised by 3.1%, but inflation had already reached 7% in March. The Bank of England warned last week that inflation could soon hit 10% and the country could slide into recession. The urgently overdue correction is not just about protecting people in difficulty in the short term. The situation turns an economic crisis into a health crisis. Rising food prices and tighter household budgets are leading consumers to swap out their groceries for cheaper solutions that are often high in calories but lower in nutrients. This could result in obesity and other nutritional problems spreading across the country, with corresponding consequences for the NHS. Ensuring access to food is essential. If 1 in 7 households does not have safe access to food, society is failing in a fundamental way. The data are all the more sobering because the problem can actually be solved, but instead it is getting worse and worse. And so there is the legitimate question, when will the government do something? We heard in the Queen's speech held by Prince Charles that the government is still planning the levelling up for the north of England they already promised in their manifesto in 2019. That hasn't happened so far, really. And when do they promise to take on this issue? The Queen's speech is always written by the government, so you know where it comes from, and it was kept once again very general. And so I didn't hear anything there that tells me that especially the poorer people in the country that have to make a choice between eating and heating, that they get help. I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.